Pull out your phone right now and search for black mold silicone bathroom. The first page of results will give you guides on how to remove it, products to spray on it, replacement caulk to apply after you scrape out the old material, and contractors who will do the whole job for $200. None of those results will tell you why it keeps happening. None of them will tell you that silicone as a joint sealer has a known, documented, chemically predictable failure mechanism when it comes to fungal colonization, and that it was known before silicone became the default caulking material in residential bathrooms. The switch from traditional joint sealing materials to silicone in the 1960s and 1970s was driven by ease of application and low material cost, not by performance longevity. And none of those results will tell you what builders used before silicone existed, how long it lasted, and why a material that bees produce to protect their colony from bacteria and fungus for the entire life of the hive turns out to be chemically superior to a petroleum-derived polymer when it comes to keeping biological growth out of the joints in your bathroom or around your window frames. I want to walk you through the chemistry of why silicone fails, the documented antifungal properties of beeswax, exactly how traditional builders used wax-based joint sealing for hundreds of years, and how you can apply it this weekend on every joint in your house for less than $20. Because this is one of those cases where the old method was not replaced because something better came along. It was replaced because the old method was free, and the new method had a margin. Part 1. Why silicone fails. The chemistry nobody explains. Silicone caulk is a synthetic polymer, polydimethylsiloxane, to use the technical name, with a backbone of alternating silicon and oxygen atoms. When it cures, it forms a flexible, rubber-like material that bonds well to glass, ceramic, and most smooth surfaces. It is water-resistant. It tolerates temperature cycling. On paper, it appears to be an excellent joint sealer. The failure mode is not a physical one. Silicone does not crack under normal residential conditions. It does not peel away from a properly prepared surface in the short term. The failure mode is biological, and it is built into the material's chemistry in a way that manufacturers have understood for decades. Silicon polymer chains contain no nutrients for fungi or bacteria. The material itself is inert, but cured silicon has a surface microstructure that is highly favorable to biofilm formation, the first stage of mold colonization. The surface of cured silicon, examined under electron microscopy, is not smooth. It contains microcavities and a slightly porous texture that provides purchase for fungal hyphae, the thread-like structures that allow mold colonies to grip and expand. More critically, silicon is permeable to water vapor. Not to liquid water, it repels liquid water well, but water vapor diffuses through cured silicon at a measurable rate. In a bathroom, where temperature cycling between hot shower conditions and ambient room temperature creates repeated condensation cycles, the interface between the silicon and the substrate, the tile, the tub surround, the window frame, accumulates moisture at the microscopic level. That moisture, trapped at the substrate interface, provides the water activity that fungal spores require to germinate. The spores themselves come from normal room air. Every interior space has ambient fungal spore counts in the range of hundreds to thousands of spores per cubic meter under normal conditions. In a bathroom, those counts are elevated by moisture and organic material. The spores settle onto every surface, including silicon joints. On most surfaces, without adequate moisture at the microscopic level, they do not germinate. On silicon joints in bathrooms, where the moisture interface conditions are consistently favorable, They do. This is why the black you see on silicone joints is not surface contamination that can be cleaned off permanently. It is an established colony with hyphal penetration into the surface microcavities of the cured silicone. Bleach kills the surface expression, but the hyphal network in the microcavities survives or reseeds quickly from ambient spores. Within weeks to months, the colony reestablishes. The product instructions say to clean with bleach. The manufacturer does not tell you that the material's surface chemistry makes recolonization essentially inevitable. A 2004 study published in the International Biodeterioration and Biodegradation Journal tested 14 commercially available silicone sealants and found that all 14 showed fungal colonization within 6 months under bathroom equivalent conditions. All 14. The study identified the surface microstructure and vapor permeability as the primary enabling factors. This was published in a peer-reviewed journal 20 years ago. It did not change what is sold in hardware stores. Part 2. What beeswax actually is chemically. Beeswax is produced by worker honeybees from 8 paired glands on the underside of their abdomens. The bees consume approximately 8 pounds of honey to metabolize 1 pound of wax. It is energetically expensive to produce, and the colony allocates it carefully. The wax is used for comb construction, capping honey cells, and sealing the hive against drafts, moisture, and microbial invasion. The composition of beeswax is complex and has been studied extensively by organic chemists since the 19th century. It contains approximately 71% monoesters and diesters of long-chain fatty acids and alcohols, 15% hydrocarbons, predominantly in the C27, C33 range, 8% free fatty acids, and small percentages of free fatty alcohols, propolis residues, and other compounds that vary depending on the plant sources available to the colony. The antifungal activity of beeswax is not primarily from the wax itself, but from 2 compound categories that are intrinsic to its composition. The first is the long-chain fatty acids, specifically palmitic acid and oleic acid derivatives, which disrupt fungal cell membrane integrity by interfering with the lipid bilayer structure. This mechanism is well documented in the antimicrobial literature, and is the same general mechanism by which caprylic acid, a short-chain fatty acid, is used clinically to treat fungal overgrowth. The second category is propolis residues. Propolis is the resinous material bees collect from tree buds and bark and process with secretions to create a sticky antimicrobial compound used to coat the interior of the hive. Bees apply propolis to virtually every surface inside the hive entrance and throughout the comb structure. When wax is processed by the colony, it invariably incorporates propolis residues. Those residues contain flavonoids, including pinosembrin, chrysin, and galangin, that have demonstrated antifungal and antibacterial activity in multiple peer-reviewed studies.
Thank you, it's beautiful.
Unprocessed beeswax, purchased from a beekeeper or natural supplier, retains these compounds. Heavily industrially refined beeswax has reduced propolis content and correspondingly reduced antimicrobial activity, which is one reason to use raw or minimally processed wax for this application. The physical properties of beeswax as a sealant are complementary to its chemistry. Beeswax is hydrophobic. It repels liquid water more effectively than silicone because its hydrocarbon-dominated surface offers no polarity for water molecule attraction. Unlike silicone, it has extremely low water vapor permeability. The moisture interface accumulation that enables fungal colonization on silicone does not occur on a beeswax-sealed joint because water vapor does not migrate through the material to the substrate. Beeswax also does not contain microcavities in its cured surface structure. Applied warm and tooled smooth, it sets to a continuous, dense surface without the microscale porosity that silicone presents. Fungal hyphae cannot grip it. They cannot penetrate it. The colony cannot establish. Part 3. How traditional builders used wax-based joint sealing. The use of wax to seal joints in construction predates written records. Archaeological evidence of beeswax as a sealant material has been found at Neolithic sites in Europe, dated to approximately 7,000 years ago. Fragments of wax in association with flint tools suggest it was used as an adhesive and sealant at least that far back. Egyptian tomb construction used wax extensively to seal stone joints against moisture in burial chamber contexts where permanence was the design requirement. In medieval European building practice, wax-based compounds were standard for sealing window glazing joints, the interfaces between lead came and glass in leaded windows, and the junction between stone sills and wooden frames in stone construction. Cathedral glaziers used a compound of beeswax, linseed oil, and chalk called glazing putty, in some historical documents and sometimes referred to as bedding compound, that was worked into the joints around glass panels and allowed to harden. Many of the leaded glass windows in European cathedrals that date from the 13th and 14th centuries retain original joint sealing material. Some of that material has been analyzed and confirmed as beeswax-based. In shipbuilding, wax was a component of caulking compounds used between planks in wooden vessel construction. The base material was typically oakum, hemp fiber soaked in tar, driven into the seam with a caulking iron, but the final sealing layer over the oakum was often a compound that included wax for surface hardness and water repellency. Naval records from the 17th and 18th centuries reference wax-based compounds in shipyard supply inventories. In American domestic construction through the 19th century, window frame sealing used oil-based putty, linseed oil, and whiting with wax as an additive for surface hardness and weather resistance. Hardware catalogs from the 1880s and 1890s list both pure beeswax blocks and wax-based compound caulks as standard building supplies. They were sold in hardware stores alongside linseed oil, turpentine, and other basic building materials. They were not specialty products. They were standard supplies that any builder or homeowner knew how to use. The shift away from wax-based sealing towards silicone occurred in two stages. The first was the displacement of wax-based window glazing compounds by oil-based putties, and eventually by rubber-based compounds in the early 20th century. The second was the introduction of silicone sealants in the 1960s, which offered faster cure time, better adhesion to a wider variety of substrates, and, critically for the building products industry, a higher retail price point and a shorter replacement cycle. A joint sealed with beeswax that is maintained does not need replacement. A joint sealed with silicone that colonizes with mold and hardens over 3 to 5 years creates a recurring purchase. Part 4. The formula. 3 versions for 3 applications. Beeswax joint sealing is not a single formula. The traditional practice used different formulations depending on the application context and the degree of flexibility required. I will give you 3 versions. A basic version for interior wood joints and baseboards, an enhanced version for bathroom and wet area joints, and a flexible version for window frames where thermal movement is a factor. Version 1. Pure beeswax for interior wood joints and furniture. This is the simplest application and requires no formula adjustment. A block of raw or minimally processed beeswax rubbed directly along a wood-to-wood joint or a baseboard-to-wall joint fills the gap and seals it against dust, drafts, and moisture, with no preparation beyond clean surfaces. The wax is worked in with finger pressure or a wooden tool. Excess is wiped away, and the joint is sealed. This method was standard in cabinet making through the 19th century as a dust and moisture seal on drawer runners and case joints. It requires no heat, no mixing, and no special equipment. Cost: 1 pound block of raw beeswax, approximately $10, treats approximately 200 linear feet of standard gap joint. Version 2. Beeswax and linseed oil compound for bathroom and wet area applications. This is the traditional formula with the strongest documented antifungal performance because it combines the hydrophobic barrier of beeswax with the polymer-forming, pore-penetrating properties of boiled linseed oil. The ratio is 4 parts beeswax to 1 part boiled linseed oil by weight. Melt the beeswax in a double boiler, never over direct flame, and stir in the linseed oil when the wax is fully liquid. Pour into a shallow mold or a tin and allow to cool. The result is a cream-colored, slightly waxy solid that is softer and more workable than pure beeswax. Apply to clean, dry joints using a small wooden spatula or a gloved fingertip, pressing firmly into the joint gap and smoothing flush with the tile or tub surface. The linseed oil component penetrates any porous substrate at the joint edge, bonding the wax layer to the surface more effectively than wax alone. Total material cost per batch, approximately $8 to $12 depending on sourcing. Version 3. Beeswax, linseed oil, and pine resin compound for exterior and window frame joints where thermal movement requires flexibility. Add 1 part pine resin, available from specialty suppliers, not the petroleum substitute, to the 4:1 beeswax linseed formula. Pine resin adds tackiness and elasticity to the cured compound, allowing it to accommodate the small dimensional changes in wood and aluminum window frames as temperatures cycle seasonally. This formulation is closest to what historical building records describe as wax-based glazing compound for window installation. Apply with a wooden tool and smooth with a moistened finger. The compound will remain slightly tacky for 24 to 48 hours before achieving full hardness. Do not apply over existing silicone without removing the silicone first. The wax compound will not bond to cured silicone, and the joint will fail mechanically. One practical note on removal and replacement. Beeswax joint compound can be removed at any time by gentle warming with a hairdryer, which softens it enough to peel or wipe away cleanly. There is no chemical bond to break, no substrate damage, no scraping required. For anyone who has spent an afternoon trying to remove years-old silicone from a tile joint without gouging the tile, the difference in serviceability is significant. You can refresh a beeswax joint annually by warming and wiping the surface, adding a thin, fresh layer, and smoothing it flush. The maintenance window on a properly applied beeswax joint is essentially indefinite. Part 5. The suppression angle. Why you have never heard of this. The global sealant and caulk market generates approximately $14 billion annually in revenue. The residential segment bathroom caulk, window glazing compound, baseboards, kitchen backsplash sealing is a substantial portion of that figure.
That's right, a 20-year
guarantee. The business model
on
of that
glossy
market
silicone
depends
caulk.
on a replacement cycle. Silicone caulk is marketed with a stated service life of 20 years in advertising materials. The practical replacement cycle in bathroom applications, due to fungal colonization, is 3 to 5 years for most homeowners. That gap between the marketed durability and the actual replacement cycle is not an accident. It is the mechanism by which a market sustains itself. Beeswax is not patentable. The formula I have described: beeswax, linseed oil, pine resin, is a combination of natural materials whose composition and application method have been in the public domain for centuries. There is no proprietary ingredient. There is no licensed application method. There is no certification required. There is no trade name to register and defend. A product built around these materials can be manufactured and sold, but it cannot be owned in the way a silicone polymer formulation can be owned, licensed, and defended against generic competition. The result is that no company has a financial incentive to invest in marketing beeswax joint sealing to homeowners. Marketing costs money. Marketing campaigns are investments that require a return. The return on marketing a public domain formula with freely available ingredients is limited by the fact that any competitor can immediately sell the same product under a different name. The investment is not made. The product does not appear on the shelf. The knowledge does not circulate. And within a generation, the homeowner standing in the caulking aisle of the hardware store has never heard of it and reaches for the silicone because it is the only thing available. There is also a building code dimension to this. Building codes in most jurisdictions specify approved materials by product category and manufacturer certification rather than by underlying chemistry. Silicone sealants meet the specifications. Beeswax compounds do not have the same certification infrastructure because no manufacturer has invested in obtaining it, because the economics of certifying a public domain formula are unfavorable. This does not mean beeswax sealing is inferior. It means the certification system rewards patentable products with corporate backing and ignores everything else. I want to be precise about what I am and am not claiming here. I am not claiming that beeswax is appropriate for every joint sealing application in a modern building. Structural glazing, high movement expansion joints, and applications with specific fire rating requirements have engineering constraints that beeswax cannot meet, and that silicone was legitimately developed to address. What I am claiming is this: for the routine joint sealing applications that account for most of what residential homeowners deal with, bathroom tile joints, baseboard caulking, window frame sealing, kitchen backsplash gaps, beeswax-based compound is chemically superior to silicone in the specific area that causes silicone to fail in those applications. It does not support fungal colonization. It does not accumulate moisture at the substrate interface. It does not require replacement every 3 to 5 years due to biological failure. A 1-pound block of raw beeswax costs $10 and treats roughly 200 linear feet of interior joint. The same treatment, repeated once every 3 to 5 years as a maintenance refresh, is less expensive per decade than a single silicone replacement job on a standard bathroom. Every medieval cathedral in Europe with original 13th century glazing used wax-based joint sealing. Those joints are still in place. The silicone on the bathroom you remodeled 7 years ago is already growing something black in the corners. The formula is 4 parts beeswax, 1 part boiled linseed oil. A double boiler, a wooden tool, and 1 afternoon.
That's all for the demonstration
That is the
today.
joint sealing
Now,
method that the industry
time to get this
replaced,
desk finished.
not because it failed, but because it could not be made into a recurring purchase. You now know which one you are using and why.